Airbrush makeup is accessible to users of all skill levels. The basic airbrush makeup skill is to spray a background pattern which is illustrated in the exercises that follow. A common and effective practice is to execute the background patterns by using a circular motion. This is also a common technique when using an airbrush in spray tanning. The idea is to spray a light, diffuse stroke and to use overlapping circular motions to build up a light layer of makeup. With this one technique, you can effectively apply foundation and blush. You are only minutes away from this skill level. There are additional strokes to practice that will increase your skill level. Practice them as often as you can. They will advance your mastery of the airbrush and your artistry. They are also just plain fun. Feel free to come up with your own creative practice patterns too. Print out the practice sheets online or buy a pad of blank paper. What can you control with an airbrush? Basically air, fluid flow, and distance. Air is first controlled by your pressure setting. For airbrush makeup, you will use a pressure setting under 10 psi. In the eye area, you will likely work at a 6 psi or lower. The general rule is to spray at as low a pressure as possible that still atomizes the product. Makeup such as Tim 2 is versatile and just a bit thicker. It can be worked by sponge, fingers, or airbrush. It is movable and forgiving after application. It is the premier product on the market. Air pressure as described above is adjustable at the compressor. What about the airbrush? As you push down on the airbrush push button trigger, more air is released. While air can be controlled in this fashion, you will find it easier to regard the button as an on-off button. Just push it all the way down for air. For less air than this, adjust your compressor pressure low. Fluid is released as you pull back on the push button trigger. The more you pull back, the more fluid is released and the heavier the stroke. The pattern of the spray is that of a cone, with a circular cross-section. The closer you hold the airbrush to the client, the smaller the circular pattern. The farther you hold the airbrush from the client, the bigger the circular pattern. To maintain the same intensity of the stroke at a greater distance requires that the trigger be pulled back further. In airbrush makeup, you will want to work in short sleeves. Use the free form to test colors, check distance, etc. You will also be using the free hand to clean up minor mistakes with Q-tips, etc. You can also hold the free hand as a gauge near the area where you intend to spray to sense airflow, where it will land, and how strong it is. When not being used for one of the above purposes, use the free hand as an additional support for the airbrush. A two-hand technique can make using the airbrush less tiring. Your free hand can be just as valuable as the hand holding the airbrush. Rather than bending both joints of the finger to pull back the trigger, many users find pressing down with the tip of the finger and keeping the front of the finger unflexed, bending only the major joints to be more comfortable. This has somewhat of an inchworm appearance when executed. The basic rule is to begin each stroke by pressing down for air. Start the stroke with fluid, end the stroke by moving the trigger all the way to the front, to end fluid flow, and then release the trigger upward to end air. This will result in a stroke that does not begin or end with heavy round bullets. There is a tendency to delay the stroke until product appears on the target. This can result in a bullet. If you release the button at the end of the stroke without first going to all air, some product will be trapped and released when you begin air on the next stroke. This puff of product will also contribute to a bullet at the beginning of a stroke. If you don't end a stroke properly, you can remove trapped product on your forearm by turning on the air. Practice spraying lines without bullets. This enforces the on with air, off with air rule. Fill in with background spray with circular motion. Practice spraying loops. For a really challenging exercise, try making one side of the loop thicker than the other. Use distance and fluid flow to accomplish this. Shade in squares uniformly. Do some squares with circular motion. Do others with linear strokes. Shade in big circles to show a lighter area due to light source. Show a heavier shadow opposite the light source. Practice strokes that go from thick to thin or thin to thick. Use distance and fluid flow to accomplish this. This is a challenging skill, but keep practicing it.